ASMR guy, and welcome back to the BFG by Roald Dahl. So let's get straight on with reading. Chapter 5, the BFG. The giant picked up the trembling Sophie with one hand and carried her across the cave and put her on the table. Now he really is going to eat me, Sophie thought. The giant sat down and stared hard at Sophie. He had truly enormous ears, each one as big as the wheel of a truck, and he seemed to be able to move them inwards and outwards from his head as he wished. "I is hungry," the giant boomed. He grinned, showing massive square teeth. The teeth were very white and very square, and they sat in his mouth like giant slices of white bread. But please, don't eat me," Sophie stammered. The giant let out a bellow of laughter. "Just because I is a giant, you think I is a man-gobbling cannibal," he shouted. "You is about right. Giant is all cannibally and murderful, and it does gobble up human beings. We is in giant country now. Giant is everywhere around. Out there, us has the famous bone-crunching giant. Bone-crunching giant crunches up to 2 wopsy, whiffling human beings for supper every night. Noise is ear-busting. Noise of crunching bones goes crackety-crack for miles around. Ouch," Sophie said. "Bone-crunching giant only gobbles human beings from Turkey," the giant said. "Every night, Bone Cruncher is galloping off to Turkey to gobble Turks." Sophie's sense of patriotism was suddenly so bruised by this remark that she became quite angry. "Why Turk?" she blurted out. "What's wrong with the English?" Bone-crunching giant says Turks is tasting so ever much juicier and scrumdiddlyumptious. Bone-cruncher says Turkish human beings has a glamourfully flavour. He says Turks from Turkey is tasting of Turkey. "I suppose they would," Sophie said. "Of course they would," the giant shouted. "Every human being is diddly and different. Some is scrumdiddlyumptious, and some is ucky-lush. Greeks is all full of ucky-slush. No giant is eating Greeks ever." "Why not?" Sophie said. "Greeks from Greece is all tasting greasy," the giant said. "I suppose that's possible too," Sophie said. She was wondering with a bit of a tremble what all this talking about people was leading up to. Whatever happened, she simply must play along with the peculiar giant and smile at his jokes. But were they jokes? Perhaps the great brute was just working up an appetite by talking about food. "As I am saying," the giant went on, "all human beings is tasting different flavours. Human beings from Panama is tasting very strong of hats." "Why hats?" Sophie said. "You is not very clever," the giant said, moving his giant ears in and out. "I thought all human beings is full of brains, but your head is emptier than a bundle. Do you like vegetables?" Sophie asked, hoping to steer the conversation towards a slightly less dangerous kind of food. "You is trying to change the subject," the giant said sternly. "We is having an interesting babblement about the taste of the human being. The human being is not a vegetable." "Oh, but the being is a vegetable," Sophie said. "Not the human being," the giant said. "The human being has 2 legs, and a vegetable has no legs at all." Sophie didn't argue anymore. The last thing she wanted to do was make the giant cross. "The human being," the giant went on, "is coming in dillions of different flavours. For instance, human beings from Wales is tasting his thighs. Danes from Denmark is tasting doggy because they're tasting of Labradors. Then what do the people of Labrador taste of? Sophie asked. Danes, the giant cried triumphantly. Great Danes. Aren't you getting a bit mixed up? Sophie said. I is a very mixed up giant, the giant said, but I does my best, and I is not nearly as mixed up as the other giants. I know one who gallops all the way to Wellington for his supper. Wellington, Sophie said. Where is Wellington? Your head is full of squash flies, the giant said. Wellington is in New Zealand. The human beings in Wellington has an especially scrumptious taste, so says the welly-eating giant. What do the people of Wellington taste of? Sophie asked. Boots, the giant said. Of course, Sophie said. I should have known. Sophie decided that this conversation had now gone on for long enough. She was going to be eaten. She'd rather get it over and done with right away than be kept hanging around any more. What sort of beans do you eat? Sophie asked, trembling. Me, shouted the giant, his mighty voice making the glass jars shatter on their shelves. Me, gobbling up human beings. This I never. The others, yes. All the others is gobbling up every night, but not me. I is a freaky giant. I is a nice and jumbly giant. I is the only nice and jumbly giant in giant country. I is a big friendly giant. I is the BFG. What is your name? My name is Sophie, Sophie said, hurriedly daring to believe the good news that she had just heard. Chapter 6. The Giants. If you are so nice and friendly, Sophie said, then why did you snatch me from my bed and run away with me? Because you saw me, the big friendly giant answered. If anyone is ever seen a giant, he or she must be taken away, Ipswich. Why? Asked Sophie. Well, first of all, said the BFG, human beings is not really believing in giants, is they? Human beings is not thinking we exist. I do, Sophie said. Ah, but this is only because you have seen me, cried the BFG. I cannot possibly allow anyone, even little girls, to be seeing me and staying at home. The first thing you'd be doing, you'd be scuttling around, yodeling the news that you are actually seeing a giant. And then a great giant hunt, a mighty giant look-see, will be starting all around the world, with the human beings all rummaging for the great giant you saw and getting wildly excited. People would be coming rushing and bushing around me with God knows what, and they could be catching me and locking me into a cage to be stared at. They would be putting me into a zoo, one of the bunkum house with all those squidgely hippo dumplings and crocodile crocodilies. Sophie knew what the giant said was true. If any person reported actually having seen a giant haunting the streets of a town at night, there would be the most certainly a terrific hullabaloo across the world. I will bet you, the BFG went on, that you would have been splashing the news all across the wonky world, wouldn't you, if I haven't wiggled you away? I suppose I would, Sophie said. And that would never do, said the BFG. So what will happen to me now? Sophie asked. If you do go back, you'll be telling the world, the BFG said. Most likely on the telly bunkum box and the radio squeaker. So you'll just have to be staying here for the rest of your life. Oh no, cried Sophie. Oh yes, said the BFG. But I am warning you not to ever go whiffling about out of this cave without I with you, or you'll be coming to an mucky end. I have shown you now who is going to eat you up, if they is ever catching even one tiny glimpse of you. The BFG BFG's hand peeked out of the cave. The sun was up now, and shining fiery hot over the giant yellow wasteland with its blue rocks and dead trees. "Is you seeing them?" the BFG said. Sophie squinted through the glare of the sun and saw several tremendous tall figures moving among the rocks about 500 yards away. 3 or 4 others were sitting quite motionless on the rocks themselves. "This is giant country," the BFG said. "Those is all giants, every one." It was a brain-boggling sight. The giants were all naked except for a sort of short skirt around their waists, and their skins were burned brown by the sun. But it was the sheer size of each one that boggled Sophie's brain most of all. They were simply colossal, far taller and wider than the big, friendly giant upon whose hand she was now sitting. And oh, how ugly they were! Many of them had large bellies. All of them had long arms and big feet. They were too far away for their faces to be seen clearly, and perhaps that was a good thing. "What on earth are they doing?" Sophie asked. "Nothing," said the BFG. "They is just moochling and footling around and waiting for the night to come. Then they will all be galloping off different places where people is living to find their suppers." "Do you mean to Turkey?" Sophie asked. "Bone-crunching giant will be galloping to Turkey, of course, but the others will be whiffling off to all sorts of flunk-away places like Wellington for the booty flavour and Panama for the hatty taste. Every giant is having his own favourite hunting ground." "Do they ever go to England?" Sophie asked. "Often," said the BFG. "They say the English is tasting ever so wonderfully of crodsquallop." "I'm not quite sure what that means," Sophie said. "Meanings is not important," said the BFG. "I cannot be right all the time. Quite often I is left instead of right." "And are all those beastly giants over there going off to eat tonight?" "To eat people. All of them is guzzling human beings every night," the BFG answered. "All of them except me. That is why you'll be coming to an mucky end, if any of them should ever be getting his gogglers upon you. You wouldn't be swallowed up like a piece of pumpkin pie all in one dollop." "But eating people is horrible," Sophie cried. "It's frightful. Why doesn't someone stop them?" "And who, please, is going to stop them?" asked the BFG. "Couldn't you?" said Sophie. "Never in a pig's whistle," cried the BFG. "All of those man-eating giants is enormous and very fierce. They is all at least 2 times my wideness and double my royal highness." "Twice as high as you," cried Sophie. "Easily, lad," said the BFG. "You were seeing them in the distance, but just wait until you get them up close up. Those giants is all at least 50 feet tall, with huge muscles and cockles alive. I is the titchy one, I is the runt. 24 feet is puddle nuts in giant country." "You mustn't feel bad about it," Sophie said. "I think you are just great. Why, even your toes must be as big as sausages." "Bigger," said the BFG, looking pleased. "They is as big as bubble hammers." "But why, how many giants are there out there?" Sophie asked. 9 altogether, answered the BFG. "That means," said Sophie, "that somewhere in the world every night 9 wretched people get carried away and eaten alive." "More," said the BFG. "It all depends, you see, on how big the human being is. Japanese beans is very small, so a giant will need to gobble up about 6 Japanese before he is feeling full up. Others, like the Norway people and the Yankee Doodles, is ever so much bigger, and usually 2 or 3 of those makes a good tucking. But who do these disgusting giants go to every single country in the world? All some countries except Greece is getting visited sometime or another," the BFG answered. "The country which a giant visits is depending on how he is feeling. always been awed to get himself an Eskimo, or to call it now. A nice fat Eskimo to a giant is like a lovely ice cream lolly to you. I'll take your word for it, Sophie said. And then again, if it is a frosty night, and the giant is feeling frigid with cold, he'll probably point his nose towards the sweltering hot lads to guzzle a few Hottentots to warm him up. How perfectly horrible, Sophie said. Nothing hots a cold giant up like a Hottentot, the BFG said. And if you were to put me down on the ground, and I was to walk out among them now, would they really eat me up? Sophie said. Like a whip's whittle, cried the BFG. And what is more, you were so small, they wouldn't even have to chew you. The first one to be seeing you would just pick you up in his fingers and down you like a drop of drain water. Let's go inside, Sophie said. I hate even watching them. Chapter 7. Marvellous Ears. Back in the cave, the big friendly giant sat Sophie down once again on the enormous table. If you quite snugly there for the night, he said, you isn't frigidly cold. I'm fine, Sophie said. I cannot help thinking, said the BFG, about your poor mother and father. By now, they must be chipping and scumping all over the house, shouting, hello, hello, where is Sophie gone? I don't have a mother and father, Sophie said. They both died when I was a baby. Oh, you poor little scrumplet, cried the BFG. Is you not missing them very badly? Not really, Sophie said, because I never knew them. You was making me very sad, the BFG said, rubbing his eyes. Don't be sad, Sophie said. No one is going to be worrying too much about me. That place you took me from was a village orphanage. We are all orphans in there. You is an orphan. Yes. How many is there in there? 10 of us, Sophie said, all little girls. Was you happy there? The BFG asked. I hated it, Sophie said. The woman who ran it was called Mrs. Clonkers, and if she caught you breaking any of the rules, like getting out of bed at night, or not folding your clothes, you got punished. How is you getting punished? She locked us in the dark cellar for a day and a night without anything to eat or drink. The rotten old rot-strubber, cried the BFG. It was horrid, Sophie said. We used to dread it. There were rats down there. You could hear them creeping about. The filthy old fizzwiggler, shouted the BFG. That is the horridest thing I was hearing for years. You is making me sadder than ever. All at once, a huge tear that would have filled a bucket rolled down one of the BFG's cheeks and splashed onto the floor. It made quite a puddle. Sophie watched with astonishment. What a strange and moody creature this is, she thought. One moment he is telling me my head is full of squash flies, and the next moment his heart is melting for me because Mrs. Clonkers locks us in the cellar. The thing that worries me, Sophie said, is having to stay in this dreadful place for the rest of my life. The orphanage was pretty awful, but I wouldn't have been there forever, would I? All this is my fault, BFG. I is the one who kid-snatched you. Yet another enormous tear welled up from his eye and splashed onto the floor. Now I come to think of it, I won't actually be here all that long, Sophie said. I is afraid you will, the BFG said. No, I won't, Sophie said. Those brutes out there are bound to catch me sooner or later and have me for tea. I is never letting that happen, the BFG said. For a few moments the cave was silent. Then Sophie said, may I ask you a question? The BFG wiped the tears from his eyes with the back of his hand and gave Sophie a long, thoughtful stare. Shoot away, he said. Would you please tell me what you were doing in our village last night? Why were you poking that long trumpet thing into the Gucci children's bedroom and blowing through it? Aha, cried the BFG, sitting up says. If you listen to everything I am saying, then you will get it. Earache. Please tell me what you were doing in our village, Sophie said. I promise you can trust me. Would you teach me how to make an elephant? The BFG asked. What do you mean? I would dearly love to have an elephant to ride on, the BFG said dreamily. I would so much love to have a jumbly big elephant and go riding through green forest, picking peachy fruits off the trees all day long. This is a sizzling hot, frumping country we is living in. Nothing grows in it except snozzcumbers. I would love to go somewhere and pick peachy fruits in early morning from the back of an elephant. Sophie was quite moved by this curious statement. Perhaps one day we will get you an elephant, she said, and peachy fruits as well. Now tell me what you are doing in our village. If you was really wanting to know what I am doing in your village, the BFG said, I is blowing a dream into the bedroom of those children. Blowing a dream, Sophie said. What do you mean? I is a dream-blowing giant, the BFG said. When all the other giants is galloping off, every what way and which to swallow human beings, I is scuttling around to other places to blow dreams into the bedrooms of sleeping children. Nice dreams, lovely golden dreams. Dreams that is getting the dreamers a happy time. Now hang on a minute, Sophie said. Where do you get these dreams? I collect them, the BFG said, waving her arms towards all the rows and rows of bottles on the shelves. I has billions of them. You can't collect a dream, Sophie said. A dream isn't something you can catch hold of. You was never going to understand about it, the BFG said. This is why I is not wishing to tell you. Oh, please tell me, Sophie said. I will understand. Go on. Tell me, how do you collect dreams? Tell me everything. BFG sat himself comfortably in this chair and crossed his legs. Dreams, he said, is very mysterious things. They is floating around in the air like little wispy, misty bubbles, and all the time they are searching for sleeping people. Can you see them? Sophie asked. Never at first. Then how do you catch them if you can't see them? Sophie asked. Ah, now we is getting to the dark and dusky secrets. I won't tell a soul. I is trusting you, the BFG said. He closed his eyes and sat quite still for a moment, while Sophie waited. A dream, he said, as it goes whiffling through the night sky. It's making a tiny little buzzing, humming noise. But this little buzz hum is so silvery sauce that it's impossible for a human being to be hearing it. Can you hear it? Sophie asked. The BFG pointed up to his long, truck-wheel ears, which now began to move in and out. He performed this exercise proudly, with a little proud smile on his face. Is you seeing them? He asked. How could I miss them? Sophie said. They maybe it's looking a bit preposterous to you, the BFG said, but you must believe me when I say they is very usual ears indeed. They is not to be coughed at. I'm sure they're not, Sophie said. They allow me to hear absolutely every single twiddly little thing. You mean you can hear things that I can't hear? Sophie said. You are as deaf as a dumpling compared to me, cried the BFG. You was hearing only thumping loud noises with those little earwigs of yours, but I am hearing all the little whisperings of the world. Such as? Sophie asked. In your country, he said, I was hearing the footsteps of a ladybird as she walked across a leaf. Honestly, Sophie said, beginning to be impressed. What's more, I was hearing those footsteps very loud, BFG said. When a ladybird is walking across a leaf, I was hearing her feet going clumpity, clumpity, clump, like giant's footsteps. Good gracious me, Sophie said. What else can you hear? I was hearing the little ants chittering to each other as they scuttle around in the soil. facing the ceiling. If I is swiggling them like this and the night is very clear, I is sometimes hearing faraway music coming from the stars in the sky. A queer little shiver passed through Sophie's body. She sat very quiet, waiting for more. My ears is what told me that you were watching me out of your window last night. But I didn't make a sound, Sophie said. I was hearing your heart beating across the road, BFG said, loud as a drum. Go on, Sophie said. Please. I can hear plants and trees. Do they talk? Sophie asked. They is not exactly talking, the BFG said, but they is making noises. For instance, if I come along and I is picking a lovely flower, if I is twisting the stem of the flower till it breaks, the plant is screaming. I can hear it screaming and screaming very clear. You don't mean it, Sophie cried. How awful. It is screaming just like you would be screaming if someone was twisting your arm right off. Is it really true? Sophie asked. You think I is Swiss-fiddling you? It is rather hard to believe. Then I is stopping right here, said the BFG sharply. I am not wishing to be called a fibster. Oh no, I'm not calling you anything, Sophie cried. I believe you, I do really. Please go on. BFG gave her a long and hard stare. Sophie looked right back at him, his face open to his. I believe you, Sophie said softly. She had offended him, and she could see that. I wouldn't ever be fibbling to you, he said. I know you wouldn't, Sophie said, but you must understand that it isn't easy to believe such amazing things straight away. I understand that, the BFG said. So do please forgive me and go on, she said. He waited a little longer, and then he said, it is the same with trees as it is with flowers. If I is chomping an axe into the tree, I is hearing a terrible sound coming from the heart of the tree. What sort of sound? Sophie said. A soft, moaning sound, the BFG said. Just like the sound an old man is making when he is dying slowly. He paused. The cave was very silent. The tree is living and growing, just like you and me, he said. It is alive. So is plants. He was sitting very straight in his chair now, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. His face was bright, his eyes round and bright as two stars. Such wonderful and terrible things I was hearing, he said. Some of them would make you wish to be hearing yourself. Some is like glorious music. He seemed almost to be transfigured by the excitement of his thoughts. His face was beautiful in its blaze of emotions. Tell me some more about it, Sophie said quietly. You ought to be hearing the little mices talking, he said. Little mices are talking to each other, and I was hearing them as loud as my own voice. What do they say? Sophie asked. Only the mices know that, he said. Spiders is also talking a great deal. You might not be thinking it, but spiders is also tremendous natterboxes. And when they are spinning their webs, they are singing all the time. They are singing sweeter than a nightingale. What else do you hear? Sophie asked. One of the biggest chatbags is a caterpillars, the BFG said. What do they say? They is arguing all the time about who is going to be the prettiest butterfly. There is all saying that they are talking about. Is there a dream floating around in here now? Sophie asked. The BFG moved his ears this way and that, listening intently. He shook his head. There is no dream in here, he said, except in the bottles. I has a special place to go for catching dreams. There is not often coming to Giant Country. How do you catch them? The same ways as you are catching buttery flies, the BFG answered, with a net. He stood up and crossed over to a corner